Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben, and it has been very cold here in Wisconsin, and I'm hoping it warms up enough soon that I'll actually be able to take the XR650L out for a ride in the snow. But before I do that, I've got to get some heat on my grips, and for the first time ever, I'm going to put some heat in my seat. I've also got a different set of rims that I plan on sticking another set of tires on for winter riding that I'll be putting some grip studs in. The waypoints here just aren't quite tall enough. I think I maybe could get my grip studs in there, but they're not really as aggressive as I would like for winter time riding in the snow. But those rims are gonna require a bit of work, and of course putting the tires on definitely takes some time, so I'm gonna save that all for a separate video. In today's video, I'm just gonna be installing these parts here. To warm my grips up, we've got the Tusk grip heaters here, which I've put on, well, just about every bike that I've owned and been riding on the channel so far. This, however, the Tusk ATV motorcycle seat heater, I have not used on anything yet, so I'm looking forward to hopefully getting that installed without too many problems. I've also got some other odds and ends here, a tach and a voltmeter that I've been meaning to stick on, and to run both the heated accessories here as well as the CarPride W702 CarPlay unit here, which currently is just being ran off of a power bank in my tank bag here. I'll be using this Tusk compact power harness, which will tap into, well, my new battery here, which will be a lithium ion battery like I've stuck in the DR and the XR. I'll explain this a little bit more once it's time to install it, but essentially it's going to get attached to my new lithium ion battery here for power, but then it's only going to be activated when the key gets turned on with the bike. And then it's got 3 separate fused circuits that I'll be able to split up and fuse depending on what accessory I want to run to each line, so really should be kind of a neat thing. So as always, huge thanks to Rocky Mountain ATV for providing this stuff for the video today. I did pick up the stapler here and the staples, I suppose, as well as the voltmeter here myself, but I will have affiliate links for all this stuff down in the description, and also put them in the top pinned comment. And if you guys are unfamiliar, if you click on those links before you make any purchases, I make a small commission off of the sale, which allows me to keep making videos like this. So huge thanks to any of you guys that take the time to use those before you make your purchases. The stapler I will need because we will have to peel this Seat Concepts cover off of this seat to get the seat heater installed under here. I have never personally recovered a seat, so that will definitely be a bit of a new experience for me, and I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I'm hoping that I can get my new staple gun adjusted properly and not shoot any holes through my seat. So I already turned the fuel off here and then drained it with the drain right there. And that's so I can pull both the seat and the tank off and gain access to run my wiring up to the front for my switches and for my grip heaters. So let's get that stuff removed. If you guys remember back to the very first video when I was working on this bike, I actually had to re-tap and install a thread repair kit to get this fastener in here, because the previous owner had an aftermarket tank that had gotten bashed, I guess, and busted the fastener off inside of there. So that was definitely a fun and exciting first time working on this bike and first video, and I've got somewhat of a hodgepodge of fasteners and washers just to make it up since I didn't have the stock fastener anymore. But it seems like that worked relatively well. So to get the tank off, the back has to go up, and then the whole thing kind of has to get pulled backwards, which means that the petcock is essentially going to get ran into my plastic, and this will get me access to the battery to swap that out and get things connected anyways, so we'll just pull that off right away. So that also gives us access to the air filter, which I replaced with a uni air filter, and the battery, if you guys are unfamiliar, is actually inside of here along with the fuses, but we'll get into that in a little bit. That doesn't seem factory. So I think I'm going to start by finding a spot to put this. Let's get this opened. It's really a pretty solid feeling little device there, and we've got our incoming power here, so this is going to have to get ran to the battery, which means it's going to have to be, well, that far away from the battery unless I want to add some line in here. This will be the wire that I want to tap into some sort of power source on the bike that only has power when the key is turned on. And then on the opposite end here, these are the outgoing power connections, so I can connect my CarPlay unit, my heated seat, and my heated grips. And we've actually got some terminals in here in this little bag. So these will get crimped on to the wires for my accessories and then just inserted in the backside of here, and then these will plug into my power source here. And these do require a special crimping tool, so you can't just use a standard tusk crimp tool like this. You've got to get this fancy one. However, if you don't want to mess with any of that and you've got a way to connect these little pigtails that they send along, you can just wire these directly into any of your accessories. And these are of course already crimped on and ready to go, so you can just plug that directly in. We've also got some fuses and a little fuse puller. I believe there's already some 5 amp fuses in there, yeah. And little switches in here with the 1, 2, and 3 on them are corresponding with the 1, 2, and 3 on here. And essentially what you can do by switching these back and forth is just change whether or not you're drawing power from the positive terminal always, regardless of whether the key is on or whether it's only passing power through when the ignition is on. And those 5 amp fuses should be more than enough for what I need. I think this is somewhere around 2 amps and this is maybe 3. And I think the CarPride W702 unit is somewhere around 1 or 2. And I think no matter what, in total, this whole system can only handle 15 amps, but they do give you a number of different fuses here if you need a different size. We'll get the cover put back on here. And I'm going to have to find a spot to put this on the bike, and it doesn't seem like my cables are really going to be long enough to get down to the battery here if I stick this up here anywhere. And this is my air intake here, so I think we're going to have to go inside of the battery box with it. We'll open that up. And there really is not a whole lot of room in here with the standard lead acid battery. But my much lighter and much smaller Tusk lithium battery here should save us some space, which is why they give you all these foam blocks to sort of make a bit more of a footprint for it in there, just so you can use the stock bracket. So I'll just have to find a spot to stick them in there where it'll also give me plenty of room for the compact wire harness. Yeah, check this thing out. Super, super tiny and very, very light. So definitely a very noticeable difference in not only the size, but also the weight. And when I go to switch my stock boat anchor over there to an aftermarket muffler, it should sort of help balance the bike out a bit. I'm certainly not an expert on lithium batteries. I would say that it probably is worth doing some research before you decide to purchase one of these. But like I already mentioned, I really like how light and compact they are. The test lights on here aren't incredibly bright, but it looks like it came fully charged. So we should be able to get this hooked back up, and then I can find a spot, I suppose, in here somewhere to wire in my ignition line. And of course, I don't want this rattling around in here, so we'll have to add some supports somewhere. Maybe just right underneath here in that space, and then maybe I can stick my little compact wire harness right to the side of the battery. So as usual, that ended up taking me way longer than I would like to admit, but I'm pretty happy with the results. This is what I ended up with. We've got the foam blocks cut up and stuck on the top here. There's a double layer. I've got a single layer on the bottom on each side, and there's one up here behind the bracket, kind of on the top left there. And there is, 3 stacked here to sort of make this bracket still work. I did sort of have to reorient the ground and positive terminals here just to make them fit on this new battery, and I do have the little spacer that you can kind of see stuck between the actual connection terminal on the battery and the terminal on the end of the positive wire here. And then I've also got the compact wire harness terminal stuck just between the spacer and this. And I did kind of have to bend this one up a little bit to make it fit, but it seems like it works pretty well, especially with that spacer in there. And that still covers it up pretty nicely. I didn't have to do any bending on the negative side here, but you can see I've got the spacer back there, and then the regular Honda terminal, the one for the Tusk compact wire harness, and then just the fastener. And because that's kind of reoriented here, I had to run the ground cable through the side of the battery box. So just kind of cut a little hook slot in there. This is just stuck directly to the battery with the double-sided tape that they gave you, along with some extra VHB tape just to kind of space it off of there a bit, since I've got the zip ties ran around the back, holding my cables up here, and that will just basically kind of allow me to have the plugs down here plugged into my accessory wires without having them kind of vibrating or pushing into these lines here. And the positive and ignition line here are just going out another hole that I cut through here. Ended up being a little bit close to the edge, but that should still do a pretty good job of protecting those wires if there's ever a hit on this side. I made sure none of my holes that I cut here had any sharp edges anywhere, so my sheathing should all stay intact. We shouldn't have any problems there. None of the wires are ran on any of the metal edges here, which we definitely want to avoid. Certainly don't want to wear through any lines. And these big old thumpers definitely put out more than enough vibrations to make that happen. And obviously my ignition wire here isn't ran to anything yet, and that's because I've actually decided to order a fuse tap here. So basically I'll pull, I think, this fuse out here. It will go into place, and then this will actually just get its own fuse on that little tap that goes on there, and that'll make a bit more sense when I get the parts, and we can go over that later. If we look at the diagram here on the side, that 10 amp fuse right next to the 20 amp main should be for the headlight, so that should only be on when the key is turned on. As far as connecting these lines, I wanted them inside of here just because this seems to be sort of the driest, cleanest area, where even in here, it seems like we do have a bit of debris coming in. I think that's because this box just really doesn't do a great job of keeping everything out. Because even with all of these tabs in the slots on the cover, there still seems to be quite a bit of space between this cap and the little rubber grommet that's in here. So I think what I'm going to do, rather than trying to drill any holes into here, is just sort of follow the factory wiring down through all of the ties and then just kind of run it just right on top of this rubber piece here. And I guess we'll see what it looks like once I actually get the stuff ran. Maybe I'll change my mind, but I think that should work for now. There is one little hard piece of plastic here that could possibly cause some issues with the wires running in there, but again, we'll just kind of see what it looks like once I get to that part. I think the next thing I'm going to do is get the grip heaters installed on the bars and run all the wiring down and back to my new plug there. And that means, of course, that I've got to pull off my Tusk Adventure guards here, as well as the Tusk grips. Woo, that was a close one. I don't know how many times I've ended up with one of these inside of my bars. Definitely not a good thing. Gotta remember not to unthread them too much. If you guys don't have a set of these aluminum wraparound guards on your bike, I don't care if you buy the Tusk brand, I don't care if you don't use my affiliate links, you should really have something like this on your bars. They protect not only your levers, but also your fingers when you're riding around off-road. I will not take a bike off-road without these, or at least I really try to avoid it. Now, while there are lots of different ways to get grips off, this is by far my favorite. You can see it kind of blows up like a balloon, and that'll allow us to slide it right off. Let's see what we've got in here. A 3-position switch. Middle's going to be off, and then one way will be high, the other will be low. And I believe this can only go on one way. Yeah, there's a little notch, there we go, or a slot, I guess, and a little tab there, so that goes on. And I will be drilling a hole for this, and this will end up on sort of the top side, so we'll only see this part and then the switch itself. This will all get hidden, but just for demonstration purposes, we'll put that on there now. These are the heating elements. Essentially, electricity just sort of runs through this little metal strip on here and warms these up. And there's no positive or negative here. You just grab one side from each grip heater. One will become the positive, the other one will become negative. Set those aside for now, though, and take a look at this part of the wiring. So the single side here on this side of the Y is just going to get connected to the red line on my plug here for the Tusk compact wiring harness. The negative side will actually get connected to the negative side of these guys. But then on the opposite end here, when it splits, we've got one side that's just wire here, and then one side that has a resistor on it. And if you guys are unfamiliar, a resistor essentially just sort of takes the incoming power, expels some of it as heat, and then lets a smaller amount through the other side. And I know it seems a little bit backwards, but if I recall correctly from the last time that I did this, the resistor side actually gets plugged into the high side, and that's because the switch is essentially backwards. So we'll get that plugged in there. This will get plugged in on the bottom side. And then again, I'll take one wire from each of these and run that to this center part here. So then essentially what's going to happen is the power coming in from here is either going to get passed through the resistor side or the non-resistor side, just depending on which side this is flipped to. And then it will flow through these out here and into the heated grips, which will of course have the other wire from each of these grounded out. And just so I don't have to find a special location to ground them to the frame, I think I'll just run a length of wire to connect both of them to the negative side of this. So then it'll all just run to the compact wire harness. Make sense? If not, the diagram is, well, fairly easy to follow, and they do have some decent instructions. We do also get these two little connections here. This can be used to tap into a 12-volt power source if you're not going to use the compact wiring harness like I am. And then this little terminal here will just plug into the center part of the switch here. But first, I've got to get the heating elements landed so then I can figure out where all the wires are going to run to. And of course, we want to make sure on the throttle side that there's plenty of space for the throttle to spin without these getting caught on anything or without them interfering with anything that I've got going on up here. I usually try to place them kind of at the front here and on the top, just so if I'm running over any brush, it's not able to grab it on the bottom. And because the plastic throttle tube on this side is going to sort of act as an insulator between the warm grip and your hand and the metal bar here, we can stick this directly on the tube. But over on this side, I definitely want to add some insulation. Otherwise, if I put this directly on the metal bar end, then it basically turns this entire metal bar into a bit of a heat sink, meaning that it's basically going to suck some of the heat away from this. And I've definitely noticed on bikes that I haven't wrapped any electrical tape around here that this side ends up being much, much cooler than the throttle tube side. So I think I'll probably go around here maybe 5 or so times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Just repeat that process all the way across. So there we are. This should be a nice even surface for both the grip heater and the grip to go on. And on this side, I think I'm going to run these lines so they're down just below this part where the fastener connects the top and bottom part of the control. That way I can sort of tuck it right under there like so, and then run it just down on the bottom side of my other cables here. I do want to make sure that I'm really careful with the 2 connection points here though, because this is just soldered on. And in the past, I've actually put a zip tie around these and the bar just to sort of keep them in place so we don't have any issues with these busting off while we're out riding. So I'll leave a little bit of space over here for that and run this just almost to the end of the bar here. The other nice thing about having this split part towards the palm of my hand is that my hands are on the bars. My fingers, which will be the part that gets coldest the easiest, will be on the main part of the elements here. And then since this is sort of transparent, you can kind of see the bar through it. I usually try to make these parallel with the bar itself, so then they'll be on straight. As long as everything looks good, just wrap them around. I'm going to put my grips back on here. Just got to be careful not to fold the element over at all. So same deal over here, more or less. Again, I just want to make sure that these are going to have a place to go, and I think just somewhere around there should probably work. Just gotta make sure I stay out of the way of the brake here. And it looks like the previous owner must have chopped this throttle tube off a bit, so this is gonna be kind of short here. So putting a zip tie in there is gonna be a little bit difficult, but I'll just have to see what I can figure out. Seems like that should work all right. Definitely want to make sure that this is not going to be interfering with that at all, and keep in mind that the tube can slide back and forth a bit. I really don't like how much those are going to rub on there, so I think what I'm going to do is slip some heat shrink tubing all the way over these wires down to, well, just about the zip tie. And that should kind of create a little bit of a protective barrier in there. Maybe should have done this before I zip tied these down and put them on. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. We've just got the grip heater lines coming out here, and then it gets zip tied up underneath the controls here to the factory wiring, and then that just sort of disappears nicely alongside all the factory stuff. Just got a zip tied here, and then it just runs behind and kind of underneath the gauge cluster here where it meets up with the line from the opposite side, which I did sort of readjust here. I pulled the zip tie off and kind of pulled the sheathing down underneath it. It seems like that should do a pretty darn good job of protecting those wires. I suppose maybe I could pull a little bit more slack out of here, but it doesn't really stick up too far, so I think that should be all right, especially with the handguard on there. That line, again, just runs down here with the factory wiring and goes underneath the indicator lights here and meets up with the other side. And along with that, I've also got this shielded cable that, again, just kind of runs down with the factory stuff and comes down here. And that'll eventually go in the box here, hopefully just underneath this little lip like we talked about earlier. I don't know if I'll have quite enough room to run a whole nother line up there, but I've actually got to run, I guess, 2 more up there for a total of 3 to connect into my 3 plugs here. Again, for the grip heaters, the seat heater, and for the CarPlay unit. I could combine them and then add some individual fusing for each, but I think as long as I can fit enough lines in there, I'm just going to go with that. And I suppose we should also get my other grip back on here. Again, being careful not to fold the element over on itself at all. Got to be careful not to blast any of that into your skin. Looks like I did end up with just a little bit of overhang here, which hopefully won't interfere with the D-Flex handguards, but the other thing that we got to be concerned about here is making sure that this rubbery end here doesn't contact the perch for the throttle cables. We've got enough room in there that I don't think there should be an issue. Obviously, this is going to drag on there a little bit, but this could definitely get sticky enough to have a little bit of accidental cruise control, which of course we don't want. We'll grab that and these. And then again, I'm just going to slide this over either one of the connections that I've got twisted together. Whichever one I choose here is going to be the positive. The opposite will be the negative. So we'll just put that over this one. Shove that in all the way to the sheathing. Smush it all together. As long as neither pull out when I give them a good tug, we should be all set. And that'll, of course, just get plugged into the back side of the switch. And then this side, it needs to get connected to my ground on here. And for that, I'm just going to use one of these little heat shrink connectors that has the solder built into it, along with some bits of adhesive on each end to seal things up. Get this out of the way momentarily, because I certainly don't want to introduce any heat to that. Now it's time for this, which I'm essentially just going to coil up in a way that, again, the resistor is sort of going to be off on its own and just kind of stuck up somewhere like that with the other 2 ends secured, so it's just sort of isolated in the air. It doesn't melt anything, but that'll all get sort of dumped in there and tied up nicely. This, I will drill a hole right around here to mount that switch. The seat heater switch, I will do the same thing over here with, and again, this is going to get plugged into here, and I can take the other end of this, and that'll get connected right to my positive here, which again is the incoming power that will be ran down all the way back to the compact wire harness. Seems like we've got plenty of wire here, so I'm going to take a little bit of that off. We'll get these two connected. So I'm going to mark a couple spots here, depending on where I think I'm going to be kind of seated and where I'll be able to reach them, and also where I think they'll kind of look the best as well. Somewhere around there. Go kind of equal distance on the opposite side here. So I just borrowed the little locking nut off of the switch, so I know about how big to make my hole in the panel. And if you guys haven't seen me use these before, this is a stepped drill bit. I definitely like using these, especially for smaller bits. You don't have to worry about busting anything. It's a lot more robust, and obviously you've got all these different sizes in one, and it really cuts through metal pretty well. So just like everything else, I'll have links for these down in the description, and these Amazon links really don't help me out all that much, but I definitely like this tool. I think it'll either go to the 7/16 step or possibly the half, since this fits over it fairly loose, and the threads on the switch will kind of be inside of the threads on here. But we'll just take it one step at a time and see what we end up with. So there we are. I believe that was the 7/16 mark, so I'll just check that with my switch. I think I'll open that up just a tad more. So there we are, nice half-inch hole cleaned up on both sides, no sharp edges or anything, which is the other thing that I like about that step drill bit, is that you don't have to switch tools to put a nice chamfer on and to clean up those edges. So really kind of a nice thing to have, and definitely a time saver. And now the switch should fit in here perfectly, which it does. So I'll just have to pull this last little nut off of here, as well as the high-low faceplate, and transplant all of that stuff to the top side here. But before I do that, I'm going to measure out the location of this hole and try to match it for the seat heater on this side. So if I recall correctly from watching the Rocky Mountain install video on this, this is going to be used to sort of help keep the heating element here down in place on the foam pad. And similar to the grip heater elements, this is just going to be a bit of metal sort of woven throughout this that just has a bit of electricity running through it, and that's all controlled by this wiring. This is our switch here. We do have a relay that we don't really need to worry too much about, I don't believe, because I think all I'm going to have to do is snip both of these connections off here. Then I'll just connect them to a cable similar to what I did with the heated grips that, again, I'll just run all the way back down to my battery compartment here. So these little guys are just going to keep the switch in place once it's installed. The diameter that I want to match is going to be, well, sort of, I guess, here. But we've also got this little notch that's going to kind of keep this from rotating, since, well, there isn't really anything to kind of tighten it down in place. So I'll have to add a little bit of a notch to my hole, but first I've got to get that located. For that, we'll use my not-so-digital caliper that the batteries died on immediately, and I've been too lazy to replace. Try to get some sort of idea of where the center of this lies. Measure once, drill twice, right? What are the chances I put that in the center? Not too bad for eyeballing it. Might as well just go off of that anyways, since it won't look right if it's not equally spaced. From there, we'll get a measurement on this without any of the notches or retainers in the way. Looks like right about 13/16. I think there might be something rolling around inside of the CarPlay unit. Hopefully this thing works once we get wired up. I did kind of wonder how long that would last on a thumper like this without any vibration damping. Might have to add something to there. So this has got a little LED that'll light up. Got low, off, and high. So I think before I get that installed on my seat here, I'm gonna run the rest of my cable so I have kind of an idea of where all that's gonna go. I'm also gonna need to find a good spot to have this plug, because that's gonna have to kind of just hang out, well, somewhere here that isn't gonna get smashed when I put the seat on, but it's gonna need to be in a place that I can disconnect it from the seat itself when I go to pull the seat off. So I'll get that all figured out and then we'll pick back up after that. So we've got the seat heater plug right here. So this again can be unplugged from the bike side of things, and then this will actually get ran sort of underneath the frame here, and it's actually going to end up poking out, I believe, this hole here. And of course the heating element will just be on the top side here. And once that wire pokes through here, I think I'm maybe going to make a little bit of a hook in here to run that wire through to this cavity, because that cavity sits right over where the rear spring and shock gets mounted up to the frame. So basically this will kind of look like this. This will, like I said, be on top of the seat, of course, but that'll poke through, again, run down through here, and with the side panel off of here, I should pretty easily be able to disconnect that anytime that I want to pull the seat off. The other end of this plug that's always going to stay on the bike, though, is just ran, again, alongside all the factory wiring. And each one of these clips is slightly different. None of them are too hard to figure out, though. This one is just basically a removable zip tie. There's a little tang on the back side of here that you just flip back, and then this will push out, and you can just re-zip tie it down into place. This just bends up. And this, you can stick a screwdriver just right in here and then sort of pry it apart. So I did all of that, ran the wires up to the front through all the factory spots. I'm gonna have a zip tie here just to kind of keep everything in place so none of it wants to pop out of here. So that wire then comes up just kind of through the mess of factory wiring and pokes out here. The relay that comes with that harness, I've just got zip tied to my other wiring here for the grip heaters, and I've got that kind of all zip tied up in a way that when this is stuck through the hole that we made in the dash, it'll just kind of pin everything up against the fairing. However, this should stay somewhat isolated, and that's sort of the idea behind this. I actually had used the hole in here initially to mount to the fastener here for the Hemisphere off-road rally dash. But as I mentioned, this thing does pick up quite a bit of the vibrations that the big 650 pumps out, so it's not really something that I think I would recommend. Anything with delicate parts like a relay really just should be isolated from that vibration. I've got that wiring just kind of coming out here, and this plug, again, will just get plugged into the back side of this wiring here, which is for the switch. So that'll just be able to sort of lay down in here. I've also got another shielded cable ran out here, and that is connected to that seat heater wiring harness. But I've also got this other little wire that is hanging down here, and that is for my voltmeter, which I'm going to use either the little piece of double-sided tape that they gave me or maybe just some 3M VHB tape, and that will get mounted somewhere around here. And I will have to drill a hole in this off to the right side here, so that has a place to go and doesn't ugly up my nice clean looking dash. But with this already connected to the bike, you might wonder how exactly I'm going to fit this through a hole. But I actually won't have to worry about that at all, because I'm going to snip this here, and then after I sort of figure out where I want this to go, I'll drill my hole, pass this cable through, and then connect it to the wiring that I snipped off from the bike with these little sort of factory replica terminals that I can, again, just like everything else that I'm using in the video, put a link for down in the description. These terminals will also require this special crimp tool though. My Tusk tachometer here is also going to get mounted up at the top. But if you guys remember from back when I installed one of these on the DR650, this just has a single piece of cable here that actually gets sort of pushed through the open hole here, and it'll just come up and then loop around and get stuck down in there. It doesn't actually get connected to this thing. And the reason that I mention that is because I essentially want to be able to unplug anything that I've got plugged into this thing and be able to remove not only the dash itself, but also give the ability to either myself or a future owner to be able to remove this Hemisphere off-road rally dash without having to snip wires and reconnect a whole bunch of stuff. It's just kind of the right thing to do with something like this that is somewhat easily removable. The shielded cable here that I've got connected to both the voltmeter and my seat heater is just, again, sort of ran down with the factory wiring like the first bit of cable that I ran down here, and I've also got the cable with the smaller wires here for my CarPlay unit ran all the way into the box here, which again, all of this stuff will just get connected to these guys here. I did snip the little fuse holder off of the CarPlay wiring, which has, I think, a 3 amp fuse in it. So instead of using that little inline fuse, I'm just going to swap the 5 amp fuse that's in the Tusk compact wiring harness for the little 2 amp fuse that came with it. So now I'm just going to tape each of these things up individually just so they don't end up sort of working their way into each other and creating a short. That'll kind of make this look a little bit cleaner. I'll just pull all my wiring down through so I don't have these giant loops anywhere. But I think first I'm going to get these things mounted up on here. So we'll kind of lay that out. Now, of course, it'd be really nice to stick a grommet like I've got for the wiring for the CarPlay unit, but I don't know if they make them that small, and I've just got the edges kind of cleaned up on both sides. I'm also sort of hoping that I can position them both in a way that the wires will just shoot straight through the holes and not even contact the sides at all. That's why I kind of went with a slightly larger hole, and I'll do the same thing over here for the voltmeter. So this does come with some little fasteners for these holes that I could have used, but I like the idea of double stacking the VHB tape on here because, well, this does more than a good enough job keeping it attached to there. I won't have to add any other holes, and it'll also add just a little bit of vibration damping. That looks straight. So I could have mounted it just a little bit higher, but that seems like it should be a pretty straight through shot. I think we'll call that good. These things actually have quite a few different features on them that basically just sort of tracks the hours that the bike is on. You can also set what type of engine and spark you're going to have, and that'll kind of dictate whether the RPMs are correct or not. The tracking for oil changes and air filters is really going to be kind of useless on a dual sport, since it's really meant for a motocross bike, which obviously has much shorter service intervals. But it is kind of neat that they have the functionality in there. I've got to figure out where I want that. Thanks, camera. Definitely trust the VHB tape a bit more than this stuff, but I guess this is what came with it, so we'll give that a shot. So when I'm going to place this now, I just got to make sure that that wiring sort of stays centered in that hole. Yeah, seems like that worked. That's an interesting sound. Probably be applying pressure on the outside, not the center. So these things are somewhat self-explanatory. Obviously the holes in the little connectors are different sizes, so the large side over here is going to go in this bottom connector, and the other smaller one to the left will go inside of here. Because the terminals will end up shielded in both sides, it doesn't really matter which side I choose. I'll just need to do 2 of each connector on each side. And I think I'm going to go with the smaller of the 2 connectors on this side of the wiring, so that means I've got to go with the bigger terminals. These feel like some pretty cheap connectors. I don't know that I would buy these. Maybe a different brand would be a little bit better. The tiny wiring kind of makes things a little bit difficult, and I'm certainly not an expert, so if you're looking for wiring expertise, you are not in the right place. But I believe this will get us by. Those are locked in. And the process for the bike side of things will be the exact same. We'll just use this connector and these terminals. And once I get that complete, of course, this will just plug directly into here. And those of you that know a thing or two about wiring and voltage meters know that this is not going to be the most accurate place to measure voltage at. The ideal location would be a spot that is connected directly to the positive and negative terminals. But then, of course, the voltage meter is just always going to be on, and while it doesn't suck a whole lot of voltage lighting up those tiny little numbers, it's still just not really something I want. I would much rather have the small amount of voltage drop that we'll see, I think, especially when the seat heater is actually turned on, in comparison, along with the fact that it'll only come on when the key is on. We'll wire up the tach next, which again is just going to loop through here eventually. But in order to get a reading from the bike, I'll have to get this wrapped around my spark plug wire. And according to the instructions, we want to do that 5 to 10 times like they've got shown here, and then we'll just zip tie the end of the wire and the wire that's running up to the tachometer together, just like it shows here. Knock some of the debris off of there. And I'm supposed to be on the super safe side. I could run this through some shrink wrap, but I don't really think that there's much of a risk. Again, it's not actually a powered accessory, and there's just a little teeny bit of wire in quite a bit of sheathing there. So we'll just run the risk, and if anything ever goes wrong, well, then I guess I'll know what to do next time. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That might be all I have room for. Well, maybe I can get a couple more. I think it's funny, I always get a lot of crap for using all of these Rocky Mountain ATV Tusk products on my builds. People can kind of look at that and see it like I'm trying to sell your product, but the funny thing is, most of this stuff, since it's all fairly low dollar stuff, and is actually stuff that I would be putting on my bikes regardless, just because that's the type of dual sport rider that I am. I never buy expensive stuff when the inexpensive stuff will work, and the funny thing is I make so little off of it, it's almost not even worth it when it's these low dollar items. I really just like doing cool stuff with my motorcycles and sharing it with you guys. There we are. So we'll just run this all the way up to where that tach is going to be, as long as I have enough wiring, which I think I should. Up until now, I've successfully avoided having to pull that seat cover off and learn how to use my new staple gun, but it seems like we're kind of coming down to the end here, and I'm going to have to figure that out. As if I can ever figure out where this wire is. There we are. And my fuse taps also came in here, so we'll get one of those installed in here. And again, basically what this is going to allow me to do is tap into the factory wiring here, and I'll end up crimping the end of it onto my blue wire here, which is just basically going to tell the Tusk compact wiring harness to power up. According to the manufacturer, this top location here is going to be basically just the fuse for whatever line is going to be coming out of here. So this fuse correlates to this line. The lower portion here is going to be, well, basically just the original fuse circuit. So essentially I've just got to pull whatever fuse I'm going to stick this into out and transplant it here. That way we're not messing with any of the wiring in here, and everything should work the same. We'll just get power to this whenever these fuses or wires see power. These are really stuck in there and definitely a bit of a pain to get out. Luckily the compact wire harness comes with this pliers to pull them out. There we are. Yeah, it definitely sticks out a ways. I'm not a huge fan of that. I suppose if I move it over a little bit and we get at least a little bit more protection from this rather than this being the highest point. Definitely should have put some heat shrink on here. Oh well, I guess I'll be taping that. Zip tie on there is just to keep the electrical tape from unwinding. This side should stay tight since that's where I started. This just will eventually tend to kind of want to loosen up, especially in a compartment like this that sees a bit of the elements. There, pretty happy with that, as long as this seals okay. So now, I've just got to get my connections put on these wires here. We can plug everything in, and we'll have power. Not that anything's hooked up yet, but you know, we're getting there. I think what I'm going to do, since I've got the tools to do it, is just crimp the little connectors that they sent with this kit here on the ends of these wires. So I'll just have to pull the sheathing back here on the outside and then strip the wires, get them connected, just like I did with the voltmeter. We've got all my wiring in its final location, kind of ready to go. I did sort of dry fit this cover, and it does seem like it'll work, I think, well enough anyways, at least just about as good as it ever did at keeping the water and dust and stuff out of here. I've got all of my connections put in place here. I believe this is circuit 1, 2, and 3. 3 has the 2 amp fuse for the CarPlay unit, which is this one, so we've kind of got 1, 2, 3 going that way, since those all kind of arc around from here. I've got my little fuse pliers and the spare 5 amp fuse stuffed in the side of the box there. And I think I mentioned this at some point to begin with, but the little dip switches on the far right side on the inside here control whether or not the terminals here are going to have power when the ignition is on or when this blue wire has power or not. And they're all set from the factory, or at least mine was anyways, to S for switched power. If I wanted any of these accessories to be able to be utilized when the ignition is turned off or the key is turned off, then I would just want to switch those all over to the left side or whichever one that I wanted. But that is, I believe, exactly what I'm going to want. This is going to be a lot of crap to plug in, isn't it? That worked out pretty nice. Bend that over, shove it down, and then pull it through, and that just kind of keeps it locked in place like that. That we won't be able to test until we fire it back up, of course. The voltmeter should work as soon as we turn the key on. And one thing I did not mention about this that I actually screwed up on the compact wiring harness is that you can put these wires in the incorrect spots because the terminals will go in either side. So you just want to make sure that your red on one side matches up with your red on the other. Seat heater switch plugged in. I think we're ready to go. Just peeking to make sure, and it looks like the resistor's in the right spot, so that's good. I don't think I got any wires pinched, although that definitely could be a problem. Let's see, where do we want to put the tach? Probably on the opposite side of that switch. It's just that easy to pull out, though. That's kind of nice. There, I think we're finally ready to go. Oh, I never did connect my CarPlay unit. Whoops. I'm thinking maybe I'm going to get some sort of little mud flap or something to go underneath this just to kind of block off that spot. You can always kind of see the headlight anyways, which I never really liked, or at least the light from the headlight, and that would be kind of nice now, especially to have that covered since got all these wires hanging down in there. A bit of a tight squeeze, but it works. It's probably kind of silly to even be bolting this down before testing anything, isn't it? I also just want to see how it all looks together because I really think I'm going to like this. Always looked good before with just the CarPlay unit on there, but something about having all the gauges and switches and stuff I think is just kind of cool. I know some of you guys out there think that all this electronic stuff totally ruins a nice simple bike like this, and I definitely understand that, but I don't know, I think this is really kind of cool too. I suppose let's see if we blow any fuses or get any power. 12.9 volts, CarPlay unit comes on. It's all looking good so far. How about the grip heaters? Dropping voltage a bit, so I think something must have happened. Throttle side is definitely heating up. This side, even with the electrical tape on there, I can tell is still just not quite as hot, or doesn't get quite as hot quite as quickly. But yeah, there's definitely heat there. So that's good. We can turn that to the middle off position. And then, yeah, that registers, sure, goes back up 2 points. Now, let's see what happens when we do the seat heater. Surprised that didn't drop. Oh, yeah, never mind. Spoke too soon, so now it definitely dropped it. So we've got an LED there, green for low, red for high. Seems like that's working, so that's good. Oh yeah, definitely some heat coming off of that. What happens when we flip this to high? Oh yeah, she really drops. Well, I guess it's still just 2 points. So yeah, we're definitely good there. Of course, like I said, this isn't going to work until we fire the bike up. If I turn the key off, everything should die. Of course, this stuff will take a little bit to cool down. Give that all a minute. I suppose while I wait, I can get this all buttoned back up. Should I check that 2 amp fuse though? I suppose I should. I'm going to pull the 2 amp fuse out just to make sure that the CarPlay unit is the one that goes down. We'll turn that back on for just a second. Yep, so we're good there. Put that back in. Hide that away just in case. Get that sealed back up. And then we can close this up. You actually kind of have to go around the whole thing, otherwise it doesn't seem like it just really wants to fall back into place. There's also quite a few little tabs that you got to hit. I'm certainly not a huge fan of having these wires tucked in here, but like I said, I don't think this ever really sealed that great to begin with, and I think this seal kind of comes out enough, or I guess the sort of square rectangle grommet here sort of comes out enough that it actually kind of butts up against the outer shield anyways. So I don't know, I guess maybe I'll just kind of keep an eye on it after a couple rides and see. I mean, any water that hits these is going to want to trickle down in there, but again, it's not like this was ever really that clean or dry to begin with, so we'll just kind of see what happens, and maybe I'll figure something else out if I don't like the results. But I've got to say, so far, I'm pretty happy with the results of my Cadillac Honda that I've got going on here. It's a pretty swanky XR650L at this point with my heated grips and heated seat and all my dash gauges and switches and all that sort of stuff. I'm really pretty excited about this. I think this will be cool. It's definitely a lot of work and certainly took me a lot longer than I thought it would. And we're not done yet. We still have to do my least favorite part here, which hopefully won't be too big of a deal. But I'm pretty happy with everything that I've done so far. I think this will be pretty nice, and having the heated grips and especially the heated seat is something that I'm sure somebody will give me crap for. But the thing is, if you're somebody like me that rides year-round and you're in a place like Wisconsin, you need heated gear like this. There's just really no way around it. But honestly, even on a mild fall or spring day, it's really nice to sort of be able to extend a ride with heated stuff like this. It just makes you a little bit less fatigued and brings the enjoyment level up a bit, which if we're not out to enjoy ourselves on a motorcycle, I guess I don't know what we're out there doing, and that's definitely what I like to do, and I think this stuff really will help quite a bit. Never did actually check that this stuff cooled down, but yeah, that's definitely cool. A little bit of residual heat there, but not hot. Yeah, so we're all good. All right, I gotta get this thing in the seat. So I actually stuck the seat on the bike at one point and just sort of played around with a few different spots of where I wanted to sit, and it seems like I'm never really any closer than about 4 of my fingers from the backside here, so that's basically where I'm going to position this. That way I should have a little bit of heat up front here. I don't really spend a whole lot of time up here unless I'm really riding hard, so this area should be, I think, more than enough for me. But of course that's got to go underneath here, which means I'm going to have to pull these staples out, but it looks like the previous owner didn't really do much in the way of actually reinstalling this. There's a couple weird small staples, and then I guess some bigger ones up towards the front. So I think the front I'm going to be able to leave. I probably will have to pull it off somewhere, probably to about here though. Whoa. So this really isn't too bad if you use a flathead screwdriver to sort of stick underneath the staples. You can kind of pry them out, and the small ones here are hopefully something you guys won't have to deal with, but I've just got a smaller flat blade that I can just barely jam in there, and then once you get them kind of up in the air, you can get a needle nose way down in here, and they come out fairly easily. And the gloves are because I already bashed my hand once, so I would recommend a set. Really should have a set on whenever you're doing anything with a bike, and as you can see, I just use an old set of motorcycle gloves, so hopefully you got a set laying around already, and you don't end up with bashed up hands. Is it roofing tar? I guess I've never reupholstered a seat, so maybe that's standard practice, and I look like a fool now, but that's all right. I always look like a fool. You don't have to know everything, you just got to be willing to learn, right? That's what we're doing right now, learning. How many of you guys are still watching at this point? Hopefully some of you. Never really know what to do with videos like this when there's a bunch of interconnected stuff that I'd have to take the bike apart 3 separate times to do it all in their own individual videos, and it seems like some of you guys definitely like the longer ones. And I think it does all kind of fit together, so hopefully you enjoy the 3-hour-long video or whatever I ended up editing this down to. Boy, whatever that adhesive is, just reapplies itself. There we are. Oh boy, that's strong, strong dye apparently. Ugh, is that butt sweat? Yeah, I guess maybe Honda just puts, oh sure, there's just a line of some sort of adhesive on here. So that's as far as I've got it. Will that be enough? Ooh, I should not be getting this all dirty. Whoops. I say that because these sort of shiny strips here are covering up adhesive that I'm eventually going to hopefully still be able to use to adhere to the seat just to kind of keep it from sliding around. And I'm interested to see with this bit of material here if that changes the feeling of the seat at all. I guess we'll just have to see. My guess would be I'll end up on the ride and not even be thinking about it at all, and probably won't be anything that's noticeable, but I think I'm gonna have to pull that off a little bit farther. Oh, yeah. I'm getting this dirty by putting it upside down, aren't I? What do we do about that? Oh, well. I suppose that would be the easy answer, wouldn't it? Oh, dang, that was close. Woo! So I think I've got this now to a point where I can get it far enough over the front here to get the pad in place. I think I'm going to want that again just somewhere right around there, which means I'm going to need to drill my hole here. And I've decided that rather than trying to make it into either of these holes, I think I'm just going to shoot right through this compartment. This will be the area sort of right over where the spring and shock is. So I want to kind of stay a little bit closer to the back here. And I think as long as I'm on this side of this little divider here, that should put me in the right area to sort of loop then underneath the frame and connect over here. But that will mean I'll sort of need to drill up at an angle like that, or I guess down at an angle if I choose to go in that direction. So with that sort of lined up, I will mark where I'm going to put my hole. If you watched the Rocky Mountain installation video on this, which again I would highly recommend because I'm not an expert here, this is the first time I'm doing it, they use a drill bit that's essentially large enough to be able to fit this plug all the way through, but I don't really want to drill a hole that big in my seat. They're also filling the hole in with some silicone, and I don't really want to open up a whole tube of silicone just for 2 little dabs on the top and bottom side. So I think what I'm going to do instead is actually pull this little plug off of here, or pull the terminals out of it, and then use this 1/4 inch drill bit that's essentially the same size as my wiring here. That way this should more or less fill the hole in, and I can just reconnect this on the opposite side. And rather than trying to drill through it right away, I think what I'm going to do is try to find a nice straight path with my awl here. There we are. I'm going to see if I can't feed this zip tie right back down the same slot there. And of course, we're going to have to pull this plug off. And I've already taken some pictures of the orientation of the red, black, and yellow wire, so I can ensure that I get them put back in the plug once it's on the other side of the seat pan. And to get those popped out, I'm just going to stick a zip tie or something comparable down in here. And there's just a little tab that we've got to push down on the terminal. And then it'll pull out just like that. Right there is the little tab that I was pushing on, and that just sort of locks it in place this way, but once it's pushed up, then it'll pop right out. Just got to do the same thing with the other ones. It seems like sort of pushing the wire in that direction as you're pushing back kind of helps free that up as well. A stronger zip tie might be a better idea also. Or even better, an old staple. I suppose stacked up, those are going to be a little bit large. Hopefully we can still kind of sneak that through. Let's see if I can stagger them all just a little bit. So hopefully it's just as simple as pulling this through. Right through the foam. And this part might require a slightly larger hole. Yeah, or maybe even just unwrapping everything. I think this thing's probably supposed to be glued down. It looks like there was some here at one point. I don't know what happened. Hopefully we don't run into any issues with that being pulled apart like that. I think what I'm going to do now is actually just feed each of these through individually. I shouldn't need to make that hole any bigger. Each one should definitely go through a 1/4 inch hole on its own. There we are. I'm going to try to give this wire just a little bit of a bend there so we're not bending on anything on the inside of here, sort of like what I did with my grip heaters. I think that ended up just about perfect. Center it back here and it's upside down. Right? Yep. Whoops. Okay, I'll have to twist my wire around then. There we are. That wire a little bit of a bend. Yeah, I mean that sure seems like it's going to fill that seat in just on its own. You definitely could add some silicone, and maybe you should, but I think I'm going to feel okay about that. I suppose we'll get that centered and put it down in place. There are some sort of lumpy protrusions in here that hopefully just the, I guess, squishiness of the seat pad and the cover here will just sort of soak up and I won't feel it, but I'll have to keep an eye out for that. These are just supposed to sort of help keep things in place front and back. nice and straight. There we go. I believe that is now a heated seat. See if I can get that adhesive to stick a little bit yet. I wonder if that stuff actually came with the Seat Concepts kit. Have you guys ever recovered a stock seat? I have not. Seems like maybe that stuff would be helpful. Yeah, looks pretty darn good. Keep that out of the way for now. So this is the staple gun that I went with. Arrow is a pretty big name in the staple gun world, and it really seems pretty darn good for $40-some or whatever I spent on it. It's nice, light, compact. Seems like it should work well because I'll be able to get down into the deeper valleys of the seat. And I don't know, I gotta say I'm really pretty impressed with it. Seems like it should load pretty easily, and I've got my air compressor set to 60 psi. It says in the instructions that it should be somewhere between 60 and 100, so I figure we'll start at 60. And the reason I'm starting out low is because I don't want to blast all the way through the seat cover, because obviously if it blasts through that, then you're just putting staples into the plastic for no reason. So I guess we'll load this up. I found online that a 3/8 is about what you want for reupholstering a seat. If you guys have any expertise or comments on that, definitely let us know down below. But this is what I'm gonna go with, and I guess we'll see how it works. And those staples are a little bit shorter than these that were in the seat, and I actually noticed, I didn't really realize that that's what it was, but I noticed a couple of these were sort of poking out, which is why I ended up removing all of them, because I think they are a bit too long. Certainly wouldn't want any of those to be poking into my anything. I think I'd actually feel a little bit better if these were maybe a little bit shorter, but supposedly this is what we want. Before I hook this up to the compressor though, I'm going to ditch the safety shades here and go with something with some full protection. Honestly, I think I'd feel better with a full face shield, maybe even a motorcycle helmet. We'll start up the front here. Keep my fingers well out of the way. Yeah, I think we need a little bit more pressure than that. Seems like it's got a good hold though. Let's see how 80 does. I guess maybe I could go just a hair more. Try 85. Yeah, there we go. Didn't go through the fabric. Seems like it's got more than enough holding power. I think we'll go with 85. It's not really a great spot to put a lot of these. These ribs kind of get in the way. Let's just go around them and do our best. It's really all you can do is your best, right? Each time you screw up, well, then you learn how to get just a little bit better. Boy, yeah, that really fits in there nice. I'm glad I didn't try to do this with my regular old non-powered staple gun. It seems like that's staying nice and tight because of that stuff that I've got there. It's a little bit hard to get this pulled tight and get the staples in. I certainly don't want to lose sight of where my fingers are at, where I'm putting the staples, so keep my eye on that. Just kind of continually pulling and wrapping. Seems to be working well, hopefully anyway. Seems like kind of pulling it down a little bit ahead of where you're going to staple is maybe a good way to go. Yeah, I can see where that adhesive definitely would be helpful, but it seems like mine's a little bit wore out now at this point. Just kind of pushing it down into the valley with my thumb seems like that's helpful too, sort of over the edge. Again, watch where my finger's at. See, now that one's a little bit too close to the edge. I can feel that poking through. There. It took the entire seat to figure that out. Well, there we go. Certainly not the prettiest thing that I've ever done, but I think definitely should work good. I think I've got probably more than enough in there, but I'm pretty darn happy with it, honestly. I guess let's get that plug back on. I can cheat because I've got one for the DR. So with a little catch for the mating plug at the top, like so. We've got yellow in the upper right. I just want to push those in with the little tab that sticks up and holds it in place to the left, in this orientation anyways. I don't know if you guys can hear that clip in, but it did. Black is bottom right. And red is bottom left. Give those all the tug test. I think we are ready to plug this in. So all I'll have to do is just slide that on through there, and that should pretty much take care of itself. We'll just kind of wrap that around and plug it in. I would kind of like to get a little boot like this for this plug. I don't know how big of an issue it's going to be. Nothing seems incredibly dirty this far up, but there is a bit of a mess down here, so I guess maybe we'll just kind of see how that goes. I certainly don't want that getting all filled up with dirt. But for right now, it is, I think, 40 degrees out in, well, the end of January, so I'm gonna get this thing put back together, get geared up, and then we're gonna head out and take this thing for a test ride to see how everything works out. Well, I don't know that I could have planned this better if I tried. What an absolutely gorgeous day for a ride. End of January, and I think it's like 45 degrees, but boy, in the sun, it feels like it's about 50. So got a bit of bad news here and there with the mods. I've put a few miles on, and definitely a couple things I think to keep in mind if you guys are going to be doing this. First of all, I actually got a bit of a heads up that there might be an issue with the tachometer here just last night. One of you guys mentioned on a short that I put out on this that you had one of these on your bike and it wasn't reading right. And there are, like I mentioned, a couple different ways to set this up depending on whether you have a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke. I think there's 3 different settings, and on some of them it was telling me that I was running somewhere around 30,000 RPMs, which of course isn't right. And then if I dialed it all the way back to what would give me the lowest number, it was still at idle somewhere around 5,000. So I actually unlooped the wire here, split it at the end, and pulled it down a little bit because it seemed like having it unlooped brought the RPMs down to something a little bit more reasonable or realistic. And now, I mean, it seems like it's working, but I don't think I'm at 720 RPM sitting here at idle. It should be, I mean, at least 1,000, if not 11 or 1,200. I'll talk to Rocky Mountain about that and see if I can't get that figured out. This, again, is going to be reading a little bit lower than actual. And it seems like if I'm moving with the seat heater on high and the hand grips on high, that number's totally fine. At idle, it starts to dip a bit, and I mean, I guess I don't know the wattage off the top of my head, but I mean, this should be about 1 amp, that should be about 2, and that should be about 3. So I mean, we're looking at 6, maybe 7 amps in wattage. I guess I can't think of what that is off the top of my head at 12 or 13 volts. But anyways, I mean, it keeps starting. I think it's fine as far as that goes. But when I had calculated all this out for the amount of leftover power after the bike uses whatever it needs, it was with the much less powerful single diode LED fog lights or auxiliary lights on there. So now that I've got 8 LEDs up there instead, there is a bit of a draw going on. So we'll get moving here. And talk about the other issue and the biggest thing that I've noticed, and that is, well, the fact that I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to go without a seat heater again. I don't know if I'm just getting old or what it is, but oh man, I thought I loved having heated grips on a bike. I don't know that I'm going to be able to ride one without a heated seat now. This is swanky, I suppose is the right term, and I'm realizing that now I'm sort of building bikes that actually match my channel name. And if you guys aren't familiar, I named the channel after my odd cat who lays down and drinks water with one paw sort of up on the bowl, and he also doesn't have a tail, so he's a bit of an odd cat. And I guess I'm a bit of an odd guy, so I decided to call my channel Swanky Cat. But now I'm building some pretty swanky big bore dinosaurs here. And I definitely do not have quite the right tires for this. Hopefully this is all mushy enough. Waypoints aren't a bad tire, but I would not really suggest them if you're going to be doing anything too intense, like a lot of mud riding or a lot of snow and ice riding. So that's why I'm going to stick a different set on here. Partially because the lugs, like I think I already mentioned, are a little bit taller. Oh boy. So I can get my grip studs into them, or I think these are just a little bit too small, but I'm going to have to watch my P's and Q's here without any studs at all, and with the slightly more road-oriented tread than the D Sports like I'm used to. But anyways, oh man, the seat heater is nice, and I think you don't really realize how much kind of cold wind you have whipping around your backside when you're out riding when it's 40 degrees out, or I suppose really any time when it's below 50. But it really does kind of cool you down a bit, and with that seat heater on, oh man, I mean, there's really not a bad spot that I found. I was able to, it's a bad time to look down, so I'm not going to do it. I was able to sort of feel the little bit of a protrusion that I had going on with the woo. Whoa, that almost bit me hard. I could kind of feel it in here somewhere, but honestly, I mean, with all my gear on and sitting on it, I can't find it at all. Maybe I will someday at some point with a thinner pair of pants. Oh, maybe I can feel it just a little bit. That might even be my blue jeans because I didn't change into my usual base layer. But anyhow, I'm noticing really nothing other than the seat feels, well, a little bit firmer, and I think maybe that could be because that piece is on there now. I mean, anytime you stick anything on there like that, it's going to sort of change the feeling of the seat. But I think maybe even just sort of having it, the top fabric stretched a little tighter over it, makes it feel a little bit different. But I actually kind of like it. It feels sort of nice for now. Anyways, I guess we'll have to see when I get on a much longer ride. But I would say the seat feels great, and I definitely am not noticing any issues that would make me regret this in any way. I mean, it feels better to sit on, and boy, does that warmth feel nice. The grip heaters work just fine. I'm not noticing that the right or left, I guess it would be the left that would be a little bit less powerful, since it's again a little bit closer to that metal bar end, which can then act as a bit of a heat sink. I'm not noticing anything there. Both sides feel great, feel nice and warm, they're working good. I'm glad that I stuck my heat shrink stuff on there. It seems like that's working great. Can't even see the one over here, so I think all that should be more than protected enough by my hand guards. Hopefully I don't get a stick in between it and rip it off at some point, but wouldn't be all that hard to fix, I suppose, if I did. Voltmeter, I guess, is concerning me a little bit now, but like I said, when I was moving, it was doing just fine. I guess we'll see. Maybe this will end in my wife coming to pick me up again, like when I blew the tire on the KLR. I don't think so, though. I think that really is just a bit of a misinterpretation, since it's not directly hooked to the battery. And I don't know, I guess maybe it would be kind of interesting to see what it would say if it was hooked direct to the battery. It's a little unnerving, to be honest, and the flashing isn't great, so I guess we'll just kind of see how that goes. Maybe I'll do something with that eventually. But it is super nice to have that. I mean, I guess it's definitely good to at least be able to watch it, even if it's not 100% accurate. Ooh, it's a little icy. I can't say enough about the seat, though. Boy, is that nice. Now finally warmed up a bit after I had been off the bike for a while. It is just so nice. And I mean, like I said, it's 45 out, so certainly a little bit warmer than I plan on riding in the winter months anyways. I'd like to at least be able to ride pretty comfortably around 30 or maybe a little less, 20. And I think this will be totally fine for that, because when I was riding around at speed and sitting on the bike for long enough to heat both the seat and myself up, I mean, that was... Where'd my camera go? It's way over there. You guys can't even see me now. Sorry about that. But what I was getting at is before and now almost, I'm actually kind of feeling like maybe I should turn that down to low, because it provides more than enough heat. So I would assume that on a much colder day, it'll do just fine. The heated grips, or the grip heaters, when it's really cold, 30 or below, not 30 below, but 30 degrees or below Fahrenheit, they can kind of leave you wanting maybe a little bit more, depending who you are. I like my heaters to be nice and hot. And if you guys are interested, the Oxford heated grips that I've got on the 701, or actually I should say that came on the 701, I think definitely would be a bit easier to install and definitely provide a bit more heat. They also have a lot more modulation than just a high and a low like the Tusk heaters do. So if you're looking for something a little bit higher quality and, maybe a little bit easier to install with a little bit less wiring, they're all just plug and play basically, then the Oxford heated grips might be a better option, and I can put a link for those down in the description as well, alongside the tusk ones. Otherwise, I mean, the seat heater really was pretty easy to install. I think the only real problem that I had was crimping on those connectors, and I think that's probably just my little special crimp tool that I bought. I think I probably just cheaped out a bit and should have bought a nicer one, or maybe I don't quite know what I'm doing. It just seems like there's a little bit too much slop in it. But other than that, man, I mean, the install on just about everything went super smooth. I'm really happy with the Tusk battery so far. As always, again, you know, do your own research on lithium batteries before you stick one in your bike. But I like that it gave me that space to put that little compact wire harness, and boy, is that thing slick. And, you know, hopefully it holds up. Hopefully everything holds up. We'll see with all the vibrations. So, you know, don't run out and buy this stuff because I'm telling you I like it now, because that may very well change after I put some miles on and some vibrations through all of it. Now, this seems to be working just fine. I don't know what's rattling around inside of it, but hopefully it continues to work just fine. But yeah, I mean, all in all, I really like my XR650L ADV Cadillac. Or Swanky edition, I suppose, as I was calling it in the shorts that I did on this. I'm happy, and once those grip heaters warm your hands up and you're on that seat for a bit, you get all nice and toasty. I could not wish for anything more right now. What a beautiful day for a ride, and what a beautiful bike to ride on. I love this machine, and I'm pretty happy with all my mods. I'll definitely be a little bit happier when I get the kinks worked out, and I know for sure that I'm not draining my battery to completely dead, but I've turned it on and off enough and messed with it enough that I think it's totally fine. I guess let's oh geez, even on low it's warming me up that much? I don't even know if I can turn that on how I was going to, but let's see. We'll turn the brights on here and see what happens. What time is it? I gotta be home in an hour, hang out with the kids so my wife can take our new puppy to puppy class. Hopefully she doesn't have to come pick me up. 11.6. So what is it? Probably reads 3 points under. So that's still not great. There's a deer out there. 11.1, 10. Uh-oh. Oh, that's making me a little nervous. 2 whole volts underneath. That doesn't seem great. Although, I mean, I guess that is actually going direct through that seat heater line. I don't know if that matters. And now we're back up to 11. Maybe I'll have to double check my math. I may not be able to run all of this stuff at once. But I didn't blow the fuse of this, and that is a 2 amp fuse, so unless there's something wrong with the fuse, it's not like that should be pulling more than 2. Do any of you guys know what is the leftover amount of wattage that we're able to use after the bike consumes everything? And keep in mind that, again, my light up there does not require the full 60 watts. It's only 35. So I think I should be all right. Boy, I don't even need that seat heater on, and it just stays warm. I guess there's a lot of insulation down there. So still a bit of a work in progress. Again, there'll be affiliate links for everything down in the description that I definitely appreciate when you guys click on before you make your purchases. But again, I think some of this stuff, or I guess all of it sort of as a whole as well, will maybe require a bit more testing before I can give it the thumbs up. So for now, we're at a I guess we'll see if it gets me home type situation with all the gear running. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out and enjoy this beautiful world any chance you get. And hey, if you can't do that right now, there's more videos to check out in the meantime. Catch you guys in the next one. Oh, that seat heat is nice.